right, welcome back to another episode of Film Facts Stats. We are a notch above your group chat. I am Jack Coyle, and I am joined by my co-host Mason Wood. He is a football editor for Back Sports Page, as well as a contributor to Shy City Sports. Mason, how are we doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing good. We had a big news bombshell right before we got in, or right when we got into the studio. So we got plenty to talk about tonight. Playoffs are coming up for the NFL. We had a college football championship. There's tons to talk about right now.
Yes, there is. We did have some bombshell news. I'm going to save that for Mason to break to you later in the podcast. But man, it is going to be an interesting episode. Also with us on the podcast is Freddie Freeman. Freddie is a professional handicapper, film aficionado, and our resident NFL expert. Freddie, what are we going to be talking about today, buddy?
Yeah, so specifically for the NFL, we're just going to look at the wild card weekend and then Super Bowl projections.
Great. I'm looking forward to it. So, if you've never seen the show before, this is a football podcast brought to you by Back Sports Page. We cover both college and the NFL. I cover college, Freddie covers the NFL, and Mason does both. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Michigan is officially the NCAA champions of 2023, defeating Washington by a whopping 3 touchdowns in the championship game. I liked Washington points in this one, and they really fell short. They got bullied by Michigan, both offensively and defensively. Michigan had better line play. Their secondary played phenomenally against what I've said is the best receiving core in the country. Michael Penix looked shaken up a few times. I think he was playing injured for at least the last few drives. You could maybe make the argument he was injured earlier in the game because he was really, really off of his game. It's of course very concerning because a lot of people were already concerned about him being injury prone, and now we just watched him get injured on the biggest stage of the year. JJ McCarthy, he didn't go crazy. He didn't have a crazy stat line because he didn't need to. He went 10 for 18 with 140 yards. Michigan ran for over 300 yards, so they didn't need to open up the passing game. It was really all Michigan the entire game. Congrats to them and Coach Jim Harbaugh. Mason, what were your thoughts on the championship, my friend?
I mean, as you said, big congratulations to Michigan and Coach Harbaugh. I also had the Washington points, and this game was very clearly it was won in the trenches. You saw, I mean, multiple big runs out of Donovan Edwards where just the offensive line would just create this massive hole, and maybe Edwards didn't hit the hole right away. You know, there was a couple times he ran into the back of his offensive lineman and then looked and was like, oh. Look at what they've created here, and ran right through the hole and had he had like a 40-yard touchdown. I mean, he was unstoppable, and so they were able to do exactly what they wanted to do in this game, which was run the ball, control the clock, and basically have JJ McCarthy be that game manager type quarterback that he was and did a very good job of. So this game ended up being a very big plus for JJ McCarthy. And on the other side, it's also a downside for Michael Penix Jr., who I think, as you said, might have been playing hurt, but definitely missed a lot of throws he doesn't make in one of the biggest stages. And this is a week after he had that performance. So even more eyes were on him. This game definitely hurt him, but it helped JJ McCarthy a lot for sure.
Yeah, great points there, Mace. We talked about this last week, and Freddie made a great point that I don't think one game really changes a prospect's draft stock. And generally, I would agree with that. The only thing is that we have been speaking about all year about how injury prone Michael Penix is, and then to watch him get injured is, I don't think that bodes well for him. A couple more things about this game. Michigan was ranked outside the top 10 in their recruiting talent this year, which I thought was very interesting for some of those future NCAA teams. You don't have to be a top 10 team. You don't have to have a bunch of 5 stars to win the championship. Like Mason said, the game was won in the trenches. So really interesting game. Like I said, congrats to Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan team. I don't know. I hope they enjoy the trophy right now because I think there's going to be some sanctions coming in the offseason. So we'll see how long that trophy is in their trophy case. But again, congratulations to them. Michigan is the 2023 NCAA champions. Moving on. Before I give out my pick for the game of the year, which is what we're about to do, the 2023 best NCAA game of the year, I think we need to define qualities that make this a great game, right? So first of all, it has to be a close game. It had to be a significant game, and it had to be fun to watch. And like I said, before I get into my pick, I do have some honorable mentions for you. The Iron Bowl, where Alabama won on 4th and forever with a Hail Mary into the corner of the end zone and a miracle play. And if it hadn't been completed, we're looking at an entirely different playoff picture. Oregon versus Washington the first time on October 14th. Just a phenomenal game, evenly matched teams. It was a shootout between two of the best quarterbacks in the league, as well as some of the best receivers in the country, all on the field at one time. But there was also great defense being played and a few really big stops. It ended up coming down to a missed field goal in the last second. Otherwise, this game could have gone on forever, I feel like. And a lot of people are going to be surprised that I'm not going to give this to the game this year between Michigan and Ohio State because I felt like Michigan controlled that game. So I have a bit of an unusual pick for you. My pick for the game of the year, 2023 college football season, was the FCS semifinal championship between Montana and North Dakota State. Two of the best teams in the entire FCS, absolutely duking it out in double overtime. Montana got their winning 2-point conversion off of a tipped fingertip pass. And we've been complaining all year about how the NCAA was changing with conference realignment. And then the decisions made by the College Football Playoff Committee made it feel like the playoffs were an invitational and they didn't really matter. Well, here's just two damn good football teams who earned a spot in the semifinals competing to make their way to the championship. And it was just a great freaking game, man. I loved it. I'm looking forward to watching more FCS football in the future, and that is my pick for game of the year. Mason, I would love to hear your favorite game you watched this year in the NCAA.
Absolutely. There was one game that stood out to me. This one was earlier in the season. It was kind of middle of the Deion Sanders hype. But it was the Colorado State game that went to double overtime. I remember being up until almost like 1 o'clock in the morning watching this game. Just an outstanding game where, Colorado was down late in that game. I think they were down 28-17 or something, sometime around the second half. And to be able to come back and put that game into overtime, it felt like multiple times that game was going to end and then it didn't. And there were some really good plays. We got to really see some of the stars that Colorado has that they'll have over the next couple of years. So that was one of my favorite games for sure. Really, any of the Colorado games, which I watched a ton of this year, but really any of those games were really exciting. They also had the game against Stanford, but the one against Colorado State for sure is my favorite this season.
Yeah, it's a great pick, man. And that game knocked Colorado out of the national conversation, really. So it definitely was a significant one. Great pick, bro. That was definitely on my honorable mention further down list as well. But really, we had a lot of fun games this season. Loved 2023 college football. Always do. Always love college football. And man, I'm bummed we got to wait another almost 8 months, 9 months now. So, but that is all I wanted to talk about. Again, congratulations to to Michigan Wolverines for being the NCAA champions of the year 2023. I will now pass it to Mason for his mandates.
Absolutely. And we talked about it coming into the show. There was a big breaking news bombshell that came out just before we got started recording. Folks, it is official as of today. 72-year-old Nick Saban, head coach of Alabama, is officially retiring. Now, this one is a big one. We also had a few other coaches retire today, but this is the biggest one of them all. Alabama now has an open coaching position for the first time in many years, and they lose what is I don't even know if you can say arguably the best coach college football has ever seen. Jack, what are your thoughts on the Nick Saban retirement and who do you think replaces him?
Yeah, man. Wow. Huge news. Probably the biggest news, college football news we've had in the last 10 years. My opinion, the greatest coach of all time. I think a lot of people share that opinion. Nick Saban has had unbelievable career, created a dynasty at Alabama. I'm shocked. I don't know if you guys are. I didn't think that he was going to retire like this. I thought that he would go out on top with a national championship. Maybe just doesn't. I get it. He's in his 70s. I understand, but man, wow, interesting news. This completely changes the landscape of the SEC next year. I think. I mean, with Alabama's talent pool, that they'll still be a contender. But I mean, Nick Saban is really that X factor that made Alabama Alabama. So I don't think that Alabama is going to get, like relegated to being no longer relevant, but I think this absolutely changes the landscape of their team. I think that, I don't know if we see them continuing this dynasty without Nick Saban. In terms of replacements, man, I have no clue right now. I'd have to take a look at who is all still available. And I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to keep it maybe internal, looking at some of those guys that have been under Saban for the last decade or 2 decades. So I wouldn't be shocked if they kept it internal. Crazy news, man. What a career by Nick Saban. Just really kind of flabbergasted right now.
Absolutely, and I think one of the things that you have to think about too is the fact that we've got the 12-team playoff kind of coming up, and you think that, you know, Alabama the last couple of years has had their struggles, and they haven't been the same Alabama. And so you think, like, with a much bigger playoff, the stakes get higher. The chances for him to win a national title, excuse me, the chances for him to win a national title have, severely decreased because of this 12-team playoff. It's going to get a lot harder for everybody. So he may look at that and think, maybe the opportunities for him, maybe he doesn't want to keep phoning in the end of his legacy here and ruin part of it when he can kind of go out at a good point. So either way, this is probably the biggest retirement we'll talk about in a long time. As especially considering a lot of the successful coaches right now in college football, they're young. I mean, Saban retiring is the last kind of the old guard, and so this is a big deal on the college football side. Freddie, do you have any thoughts about the Nick Saban retirement?
Not a bunch. Um, However, being that I watched my second ever college football game on Monday night, and it was a solid game, and I was mainly interested in the draft stock of the quarterbacks in that game. But even I know who Nick Saban is, and I know how big of a deal this is, and I know that he doesn't have anything left to prove. He doesn't have to go out on top to go out on top. So definitely a huge deal that even I understand.
Absolutely. And now like we said, a big head coaching opening now available in Alabama. Speaking of head coaching openings, the NFL has basically, they didn't really have a Black Monday this year. It's been more of a Black Week. We've seen kind of coaches get fired kind of throughout the week. We've seen organizations really take their time to make these decisions. And I think the biggest thing is with the new addition of the rule that you cannot interview other candidates from other teams until after the wild card round. This basically gives teams that sort of week to, take time to make those decisions. Now, some teams took way less time than others. If you're the Atlanta Falcons, they fired out Arthur Smith literally the night after their game. Their big loss to the Saints that basically put them in a position for a third straight 7-10 season. Arthur Smith is officially gone. As of right now, they have not made any requests for any of their head coaches or anything like that. Jack, do you think that there is a good fit for the Falcons head coaching job out there, or what kind of coach do you think fits best for the Falcons besides the fact a guy that actually uses the players that the GM provides?
Yeah, I think that's a big point. That's a big point for you. For me, man, and this is just kind of my opinion across the board, is Mike Vrabel. I think he's the best coach available, and I think that he would, wherever he goes, I think that he's going to put together a squad. If he Excuse me. I think that he would have a ton of success in New England because he has that history there, obviously played there. And he's kind of like a local legend in New England. So I think that he could really easily step into that Belichick position that is going to be vacating here. So I think he would make a great fit there. I can also see him plugging right into Atlanta. And also, really, he would have success on the Chargers as well. I just think that Vrabel is the most talented coach available. So I think really, that for me, that speaks to how I view him as such a high candidate. I think he'll be able to plug in anywhere, particularly Atlanta. But I'm just really high on him.
Absolutely. Freddie, what about you?
Yeah, so specific to Atlanta, and this carries over to a lot of teams that are going to have open positions. Whenever you have a quarterback in his first contract in the NFL, or you're not sure who your quarterback is going to be, I'm a fan of an offensive mind in there. So I love Vrabel. I'm not sure why he was fired. That's really a talent problem, which the head coach is involved in, but that's not his primary concern. So I love Vrabel, and he could be successful in Atlanta. They do have a lot of talent there already, but I want to see a guy who can play around with Desmond Ridder a little bit, maybe draft a guy without trading up crazy early in the draft. Maybe a quarterback falls a little bit to the Falcons. and they see what they have there. So I'm an offensive mind guy in general, but I think Vrabel would be a perfect guy for the Chargers. Absolutely. I think Herbert, and really Trevor Lawrence, if the Jags end up firing Peterson, he could take either of those quarterbacks. They're above that tier where they need an offensive mind. They just need an actual good coach.
Absolutely. I can completely understand that. The Atlanta Falcons job is going to be an attractive one with some of the players that they have there, but it's also going to be one with high expectations. So that is one of the coach openings that I wanted to mention. Another one that is open that I also wanted to mention, and I'm mainly mentioning it because of who they've already requested to interview. The Washington Commanders ended up firing Ron Rivera after 4 seasons. This was a move that many people kind of expected a few months ago. And they kept him throughout the season, officially fired him this week. Now, they were interviewed multiple, or they've requested to interview, multiple defensive coordinators, including Mike McDonald of the Ravens, Dan Quinn of the Cowboys, Aaron Glenn of the Lions, Raheem Morris of the Rams, and also the Ravens defensive line coach Anthony Weaver, while only looking at 2 offensive coordinators, that being Bobby Slowick from the Texans and the Lions offensive coordinator Ben Johnson. So it seems that the Washington Commanders are wanting to go kind of the defensive route with their new head coach. Freddie, we'll start with you. Do you think that this is the right move for the Washington Commanders organization to go the defensive route at head coach?
So I'm not totally against it. Here, I think Howell would benefit from an offensive mind. This leads me to believe, and I'm not caught up on the coaching news yet, but this leads me to believe that Bieniemy will be sticking around and they're going to give him another chance. I'm not a huge fan of that. I think they need to add talent to their offensive line, regardless of who their head coach is. And I think this is more interesting than me being against it, even though they have a young quarterback, because they also have a ton of young talent throughout the whole defense. I'm not sure if I said that before, but if I did, it's worth saying again. So I really like the possibility of a defensive guy in here. Again, I would go the other way, and I mean, but Washington's always a disaster. So,
Jack, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, man. I mean, I want to echo a little bit of what Freddie said. Is I think it kind of depends on what you're looking for in terms of who you want to focus on raising up. Like you said, they got a ton of young defensive players, but they also have the young guy, Sam Howell, at quarterback. So if you're looking to, really plug a guy in there who's going to kind of train up Sam Howell and make him the franchise quarterback, which I don't know how much you really want that to happen anyways. But if that's what you're looking for, then you put an offensive mind in there. If you're really looking to be a playoff contender, in my opinion, and actually make a really long run, then you want a defensive mind there for Washington. So in my opinion, you go with a defensive guy.
Yeah, I think I'm honestly, I'm gonna have to disagree, and the only reason I'm disagreeing with kind of them going with a defensive guy, I think an offensive guy is best because they have a high draft pick, and odds are I think they're going to end up with a guy like Drake May or something. They very much may end up with a quarterback, and you can't forget about that fact that they could end up with a quarterback, and then they're going to have a defensive-minded coach. I think this may say that they're not going to get a quarterback in the draft. Freddie's got something to say. Freddie, go ahead.
dude, I've seen some mocks where they get Drake May, and Drake May is Sam Howell if Sam Howell was worse than Sam Howell. So look, I don't they may go quarterback, and I would disagree with that. I like Sam Howell's. He obviously has things to clean up 100%. But something that goes to the enemy offensive line, wouldn't have to get into this whole conversation right now. That's not the point of this segment. But I couldn't help but visibly react to the mention of Drake May replacing Sam Howell. But sorry, back to you, Mason.
Hey, that's okay. That's okay. I just think there's an interesting decision to be made for the Washington Commanders, especially having a new owner and everything. It's going to really, their head coach pick is going to really help point their franchise in whichever direction they're going to go over the next couple of years. Now, there's a couple that I want to briefly mention before we get to the last one that I want to talk about. Already kind of mentioned it, Jack did, but the Tennessee Titans fired head coach Mike Vrabel. He's going to be one of the most sought-after coaches in the league, basically being scapegoated in this position after having a terrible GM for a few years and then basically having to deal with what was left of that GM over the last couple of years, and they really haven't been able to do much. They were solid at times this year, but the record does not show, what we feel with Mike Vrabel. Unfortunately, the Titans fire him, and he'll definitely be getting a new job as a head coach somewhere very shortly. Another big one that dropped was the Seattle Seahawks and head coach Pete Carroll. They agreed that he will not be back as the head coach after 14 seasons as the head coach of the Seattle Seahawks. He's supposedly going to be transitioning into an advisory role, which is basically saying, hey, we really appreciate you and everything like that. And we don't want to fire you because that's really rude and you've done a lot for this organization, but we need you to stop coaching this team, please. It needs to happen now. And that is basically what they told Pete Carroll. So now the Seattle Seahawks have a wide open position after just barely missing the playoffs and basically finishing around 500 3 seasons in a row. Now, there's one more I want to mention before we get, actually, two more I want to mention before we get to the final one that I want to ask you guys about. There is the Las Vegas Raiders, which has Antonio Pierce kind of lined up, I feel like, to take that position. However, they are going to have to conduct an entire head coaching search. It is required by the league. So they will look at candidates, but I think the smart move here that everybody expects is that they will stick with Antonio Pierce, who did a very good job after the Josh McDaniels firing for the Raiders, and he kind of embodies what it means to be a Raider. Then you have the Carolina Panthers, who this one's kind of been open for a while after the Frank Reich firing about 11 weeks into the season. They have already requested to interview many different coordinators and stuff like that, with a slew of offensive coordinators being included. The only defensive coordinators being Dan Quinn, Mike McDonald, and Raheem Morris. Everybody else, there's about 7 offensive coordinators that the Panthers are looking to hire, so they are looking to get Bryce Young some help. Finally, the last one that I want to mention, and this one is mainly because there's some interesting candidates that have been requested or already interviewed for this team. That is the Los Angeles Chargers, one of the most attractive jobs in the NFL, one that has Jim Harbaugh's name written all over it right now. People are talking about him going there. As of right now, the Los Angeles Chargers have already interviewed their interim head coach, Jeff Smith. They've also interviewed offensive coordinator Kellen Moore, who was the former Dallas Cowboys offensive coordinator and was sought after beforehand, moved on, and obviously it didn't work out too well, but also Justin Herbert was injured for a large part of the season. There's also a few other offensive coordinators they've requested to interview, guys we've already mentioned, like Ben Johnson, Brian Callahan, Todd Monken from the Ravens. There's also a few defensive coordinators. They've requested to interview Dan Quinn, Patrick Graham from the Raiders, Raheem Morris from the Rams, and this is the one that really interests me the most. They will interview former Bills defensive coordinator Leslie Frazier, a name I have not heard in quite some time. I think that that is the exact opposite route of where the Chargers should be going. But I want to know your guys' thoughts. What kind of coach do the Chargers need? And on the back end of that, is Leslie Frazier the guy that the Chargers need? Jack, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to make this really simple, Mason. Jim Harbaugh is the guy for the Chargers. He has spoken publicly about how high he is on Justin Herbert. Harbaugh is just perfect for the Chargers role. Like you said, it's one of the most coveted roles in the NFL. You get to go to beautiful Los Angeles. You have some of that nice young talent on the roster with Puka Nacua and some of those other guys. Like I said already, Harbaugh has publicly said how high he is on Justin Herbert and in interviews. So I would be shocked if he lands anywhere else. And so, your question was, what kind of coach should play for or should be the head coach of the Chargers? I will not answer what kind of coach. I will say the coach should be Jim Harbaugh.
All right, fair enough. I will say, Freddie, you said Puka Nacua. Puka's on the Rams. I have to say that.
Oh, my
Puka's
bad.
on the Rams. You almost gave Freddie a heart attack, but they do have some good receivers there. They have Quentin Johnson there, and they also have Mike Williams, who was injured for a large part of this year, but a guy that I really liked when he was at Clemson, and he's done a really good job down there in Los Angeles. Freddie, do you feel that the Chargers need to find a good offensive mind? Is Jim Harbaugh the guy for them? Is it Leslie Frazier the guy? What are your thoughts for the Los Angeles Chargers?
Yeah, so I was gonna have a heart attack, Mason. Thank you for pointing out Puka Nacua. I mentioned before in the Mike Vrabel tidbit, I think he's good enough of a coach, even though he's a defensive guy, to come there, and they have great talent on defense, is not maximized, and he'll be able to do good things because Herbert breaks that necessity for an offensive mind. That said, two things occurred to me that are very interesting. First we'll go this way: Dan Quinn to be the head coach and Kellen Moore to finish out his contract as the offensive coordinator there. They have a history together. Kellen Moore, combining his creativity, we spoke about this a couple weeks ago, combining his creativity with Brendan Staley's creativity did not work. The offense was atrocious, even with Herbert. Even Keenan Allen was in and out. Mike Williams got hurt early, but the offense just wasn't working. So I think maybe Dan Quinn takes a lot of responsibility off of Kellen Moore. That would be a very interesting situation. And then Todd Monken jumps out to me as a guy who he turned what he did. We spoke about this before too, but he said, Lamar, you're not going to be dynamic forever. Can you be a pocket passer? And he put together an offense that worked for a guy who's not a top 5 pocket passer in the NFL based off of talent, but that offense works. So Todd Monken, very interesting, been around a long time. And that would be really fun to see Justin Herbert with an actual competent offensive guy running things. And I'm not abandoning Kellen Moore just yet in his coaching career, but he did a terrible job this year. So those two things jumped out at me.
Absolutely. I can't say I disagree. I think one note about most of those candidates that I'd like to mention, all of them, with the exception of Todd Monken, Ravens offensive coordinator, a lot of those candidates, this would be the best quarterback that they've ever worked with before. So that does continue to make this job very attractive to young offensive minds. And I also think that there's opportunity there for, a guy like Dan Quinn and Kellen Moore. They're like, we can get it together, try and run back kind of what we had in Dallas, but with a better quarterback. There's a lot of opportunity there. There's a lot of excitement because especially those two were a part of something really good down in Dallas. And unfortunately, they had some chokesters on their team. So with that being said, the Los Angeles Chargers, as I said, the most attractive job in the NFL. We'll have to see if it ends up being Jim Harbaugh's future destination. So that's all of my mandates for this week. I appreciate everybody listening in and the opinions of Jack and Freddie. We'll go ahead and throw it over to Freddie for his mandates.
Before we transition to my mandates, I want to actually mention, I think the Raiders are the most interesting destination. Vegas is quickly becoming the sports capital of America. They're getting teams all over the place. There's a ton of money in Vegas, obviously. Even like UFC's there, and just everything more and more is coming there. And Antonio Pierce may have that inside track, but this is a very interesting coaching position that's vacant and a very interesting city to track. So just wanted to mention that. Okay. So as for my mandate, we're going to be talking a little bit about Wild Card Weekend, and I'm going to start in the AFC. So obviously the Ravens have the bye, and I'm going to start just Browns Texans. Look, they played before, and there are people injured both sides, but the Browns are getting healthier as the Texans are healthier than they were last time they played, but the Browns are getting healthier. And look, this defense is so good that with just barely competent quarterback play and switching quarterbacks in and out, trying to find their guy, they rested their starters in the final week and locked up the 5 seed. And really, if the Ravens hadn't have had the season that they had, the Browns could have still been in contention for the 1 seed. So that's how good this defense is, even though they've had their injuries and guys are coming back. Like I said, I have the Browns beating the Texans. That defense is just going to smother them. Moving on to the Saturday night game, Dolphins Chiefs. Now, this is very interesting because the Dolphins are very banged up all over the place. But the Chiefs have had horrible offensive play throughout the entire season. This is going to come down to, do the Chiefs call enough and the right run plays? And I don't think that they do. And I think that the Dolphins offense being healthy enough. Sorry, we just got to know 0 degree weather. Mason, which game is going to be 0 degree weather?
That game, the Chiefs and Dolphins game, is supposed to be like negative. It feels like -4 in Kansas City. That's going to be a big factor on that game on Saturday night.
Okay, so definitely interesting. Maybe leaning more towards the run game in that case, but I still don't trust the Chiefs' play calling. And even with all the Dolphins' injuries, primarily on defense, I think their offense is going to be healthy enough to get all their starters out there. And I think they compete. This is going to be like a 34-28 kind of thing, but I think the Dolphins win that game. So I have the Browns and the Dolphins as the 5 and the 6 seed winning. And then obviously the Bills against the Steelers. Look, give me James Cook for at least 50 yards and a touchdown. I'm trying to keep things a little bit of a betting note here as well. The Steelers are very banged up in their secondary, really the second and third level. So, and TJ Watt, he's out. So I just all over the place. Look, the Steelers didn't deserve to be here. It's just that there's a 7 seed and they just kind of with all the other incompetence in the NFL they got there. But should be an easy win for the Bills. I'm not saying they can't blow it. I could see them blowing it. I give it about like a 8% chance. But I'm going with the Bills to win that game. So we're going to have the Ravens, the Bills, the Browns, and the Dolphins. Within that, I have the Ravens to beat the Dolphins again. Dolphins are still going to be very banged up in that game. And then I have the Browns beating the Bills, and I have Ravens Browns in the conference game. Now, before I talk about who wins that, I'm going to go to the NFC. So the NFC, we have Cowboys, Packers, the 2 and the 7 play. Look, the Cowboys should be able to blow through this game like nobody's business. Dan Quinn has been leading the Cowboys all year. It's going to be interesting to see if they could contain Jayden Reed out of the slot. That's my biggest question mark in this game for the Cowboys. And I'm not super confident in Mike McCarthy's competence to run this offense, but I do think they get enough going against that like below mid Packers defense. So Cowboys coming out on top. We have the Niners with the bye, the Cowboys at the 2 seed. Rams Lions. Now this game is going to be a ton of fun. Forget the quarterbacks reuniting after the not reuniting, but replaying their old teams after the trade. The Lions have been playing really inconsistent ball in a lot of positions. You've seen Jared Goff, you've seen the linebackers, you've seen the corners for the Lions. Now CJ Gardner-Johnson is back, but we've just seen inconsistent play just across the entire Lions squad. So Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator, kind of going back to that previous conversation, it might be a little early for that guy, and as well as Aaron Glenn. But either way, the Rams have a lot less talent than the Lions. But Sean McVay, man, if he already didn't win a Super Bowl, like he would be in the Coach of the Year conversation. But you kind of look at him, he's like, yeah, well, we know Sean McVay is really good. And he got here with like Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald, and then Puka Nacua, who just like he maximized way beyond his talent. Like this is Sean McVay. This is the reason why the Rams are here. And this is going to be a high-scoring game, but the winner is not going to matter because for the similar reason, the Eagles and Bucks, the winner is not going to matter. This is going to come down to the trenches. The Bucks have not been able to run the ball well all year, but the Eagles have been playing horrible football in like every way for even when they were winning, but it got worse and they started losing. So both of these games for the NFC don't matter because the Cowboys and the 49ers are going to beat whoever makes it to the divisional round, and they're going to play in the conference championship. I'm going to pause here, and we'll come back to the conference games. But what are your thoughts, Jack? We'll start with you, and then we'll go to Mason.
Yeah, man, I like every single one of those picks we agree on. The only thing, well, okay, what was your pick on Philly and Tampa Bay? Who are you siding with?
So it's really tough to pick. And it's just ridiculous to say. Based off of roster, this isn't even close.
Right.
Todd Bowles, amazing job. Eagles coaching and talent has just fallen apart. I'm leaning Eagles because of all that talent and because they do have the ability to win in the trenches. And that's kind of where the Bucks are trying to win games, but are a little shaky. So I'm leaning Eagles, but like I said, I don't think whoever wins that game is going to win the next one. So
right. No, I was just interested in your take on that, but I have the exact same championships on my picks as well. I don't know if I told you guys, but I've had a future placed on Baltimore and San Francisco since like the first week of the season, so that needs to be the Super Bowl this year. But no, I love all of those picks. I think, like you said, the Detroit and the LA game is definitely going to be the best game on this slate. However, I think Cleveland and Houston is going to be pretty close too. I really like that game. And my lock of the week is actually going to be in that game as well, which I will talk later about. I love the Dolphins pick. However, with that 0-degree weather, they're not going to be able to throw the ball like they have in the past. I still see them beating the Chiefs, though. I think they're a better squad. Yeah. Let's see. Pittsburgh's not going to make that game close. And you mentioned something you said Dallas shouldn't have a problem with the Packers. I'm going to go a step further and say they can't have a problem with the Packers. If they really want to be a competent team and play and go to the next level, if they're going to actually try and make a Super Bowl run, you've got to go through the Packers like a knife through hot butter, man. You really do. Otherwise, what are we even talking about? If you can't beat the Packers and cover the spread, then you're not going to be able to compete with San Fran. So I love the picks, Freddie. I'm echoing everything you said.
Boosting my ego a little bit. Mason, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I have to play devil's advocate a little bit here. First things first, when I take a look at the Browns-Texans game, this is where I think the biggest storyline of the playoffs is going to come out, and I think that CJ Stroud is going to perform in this game. He's done some amazing things. He's done things that other rookies at the position have never done in the National Football League, and I think one of those is going to be beating a top 10 defense in the NFL in the playoffs wild card round. I think this kind of lines up perfectly for them to kind of have that storybook. I don't think they advance past the divisional round. However, now, when it comes to that Chiefs-Dolphins game, I think that this game is going to be very close. And had we not have had the weather that we already mentioned, the 0 degrees sort of thing, I would be all in on the Dolphins here. But because of that, I think that that's really going to affect them. It also depends on whether or not they have Jalen Waddle. Their offense is way less dynamic without Jalen Waddle. We've seen that in the past couple of weeks. It's a lot harder for Tyreek Hill to even get into open space without Jalen Waddle. Everything gets more difficult when you lose a guy like that. They've also gotten banged up on their defense a little bit, so they're kind of one of the more injury-prone teams entering the playoffs. I think that they struggle in this game mainly because of the weather, and I think that the Chiefs come away with it. Everything else I pretty much agree with you with. I would argue that the Lions do have a really good chance this weekend, but I think that in order for them to be able to come out and beat them, it's going to come down to their defense and some of those playmakers that they've added. I look for guys like Brian Branch to have a really good game in order for them to advance, right? If I look back and it's a 31-27 game that the Lions won, I'm expecting that Brian Branch had a really nice game. Guys like that, I expect some of those playmakers to be involved. Now, ultimately, when it comes down to it, to the conference championship games, I think that it's going to be Chiefs Ravens. I think that one is, the Chiefs have slowly started to maybe kind of figure it out. I think that they've kind of gotten the week off where they were able to rest people. I still think that they've got it and they're going to be able to put things together to get up there and play against the Ravens. However, that game in itself, we'll talk about a winner at another time. The other side of things in the NFC, I think that this one is kind of cut and dry as far as the 49ers are going to advance in the conference championship. That one, I have no ifs, ands, or buts about. I have a lot of faith in the Eagles this weekend, as much as I probably shouldn't, but I do think that they're going to beat the Buccaneers. I feel like, Baker Mayfield has highs and lows that only last for a few weeks. He's getting ready to hit one of his lows, and I think that that's going to come this week, and the Eagles turn it around at a good time. If they don't, Nick Sirianni's job may be on the line, we've heard. So it's a big game for Philadelphia, and I think that they're going to get it done. However, I don't think that they are able to get past the divisional round. It doesn't really matter who they face. I just don't think they're going to get past the divisional round. Ultimately, what I think ends up happening is the 49ers end up in the Super Bowl alongside the Ravens. So I think that Jack makes a lot of money. That's my ultimate opinion on everything. So we have a little bit of differing opinions, but in the end, we're all kind of getting to, I think, a similar destination.
So we're actually not. And
Oh,
I'm excited. There's a reason why I wanted to stop where I stopped. So, we disagree in a little on little things here and there. We wouldn't have to go back through that. But so right now where I'm at is Browns Ravens, and Mason and Jack, you agreed with me,
Yep.
and 49ers Cowboys. And I think, Mason, you're at the same spot in the NFC, but in the AFC you have the Chiefs. Now, here's the thing. I don't think the Browns lose another game this season. I have the Browns winning the Super Bowl. No matter who wins between the 49ers and Cowboys, which is a game I'm not going to pick because the Cowboys have inconsistent play calling for Mike McCarthy, and Dan Quinn is doing a tremendous job, but he's just lacking talent at linebacker. Like, it just doesn't exist. He's materialized competent play, great turnover stuff, and just everything, but they're not that talented. So I don't know who's going to win the Cowboys 49ers game. The 49ers could end up having one of their dead games. They could blow the Cowboys out. It could go either way. I don't think it matters. The Browns defense is that good, and they win in the trenches on both sides of the ball. So I have the Browns beating the Ravens, and we could talk a bit more about that if you want, but I have the Browns winning the Super Bowl. Gentlemen, what are your Super Bowl picks?
I want to talk about what it is that you're smoking, because I could use some of it. It sounds like it's pretty good. No, in the end, Super Bowl picks, like I said, I think it's Ravens 49ers, and I think that the 49ers end up taking this one in a very close game. I think it's kind of a repeat of what we saw back in 2012 when these teams played, but I think the 49ers barely end up etching it out. Let me say this now, not going to be surprised if I'm wrong. I'm not discounting the Ravens whatsoever. Jack, what do you think?
Yeah, man, I got the Niners. They have the most talented team in the country. I can't bet against them. By the way, Freddie, I just checked the odds. So right now, if you were to bet outright for the Browns to win, they're plus 3,000. So go ahead and place that right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, do it, dude. I love it. No, first of all, I would love it if the Browns won the Super Bowl. I think that would be awesome. What a great storyline for Joe Flacco. And honestly, that's what this season deserves. If you watch this whole season, it
Yeah.
deserves a Browns Super Bowl champion. Okay, that is poetic justice. Is in my opinion. However, man, I can't bet against the 49ers in that squad. Like you said, there have been some really poor games. Brock Purdy's thrown for over 3 interceptions in a couple of them. However, man, I can't bet against them. I agree with Mason that I think it is going to be a really close game with the Ravens. And speaking of which, I think the Bills lose by a field goal in their last game. I think the Bills give it a really hard run. They started out really slow, but I think Josh Allen's done a really good job of kind of galvanizing that team. And so I wouldn't be surprised if the Bills are actually make a really far run as well, and they're just there to make it to the AFC Championship.
Yeah. So, okay, let me give my case for the Browns, if
Yeah.
you will. So, playing the Texans here now, I love CJ Stroud. I loved him more than most people. I had him going to the Panthers, and you can check me on that because it's published. You can check my mock draft, and you can check the date on it. I had CJ Stroud over Bryce Young. Love CJ Stroud. This Browns defense has been missing Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Anthony Walker, who's out for the year, but Grant Delpit. They were missing both safeties for a bit. These guys are back. Anthony Walker's not, but everyone else is healthy on this defense. I don't think this game with the Texans can be close. Denzel Ward can cover Nico Collins. Sorry, it's just going to happen. Martin Emerson, good player, plays some nickel for him. Greg Newsome, he can cover these, like Robert Woods, of course. And then Miles Garrett, Zadarius Smith, and Okoronkwo. Jesus. So, I mean, those guys are just phenoms up front. They put all three of them on the field at the same time sometimes. The Texans' strong suit is not their offensive line. So I have them rolling through that. Then I have them playing the Bills, but even if they play the Ravens that week, look, the Ravens lost to the Browns already without Flacco, who's been the Browns' most consistent quarterback. Even though he throws picks, he's been their most consistent quarterback. And the Ravens are not playing lights out football. They played solid, but you look at the Dolphins. Oh, they're playing lights out ball. No, don't just look at the end result. There's a lot that went into that. Tua threw a couple picks like we knew he would, and the Lamar was just solid. That's just it. He wasn't great. He was solid. Keaton Mitchell being out takes a lot of dynamic ability from the run game. Dalvin Cook doesn't provide that. Gus Edwards is not the same. He's just not that speedster. So I think that one's going to be close. Whenever they play the Ravens, it's going to be close. But I think the Browns edge it out because they did it last time with worse quarterback play. That said, whoever the Browns play outside of that, whether it's the Bills or the Chiefs or the Dolphins, they have the defense to stop all of those offenses. The Bills and Chiefs wouldn't even really particularly be close. They could win those trenches. They go just man to man. Those linebackers fly around. And those defenses aren't good. They're not equipped. The Chiefs are the exception. The Chiefs are the best defense outside of the Ravens and the Browns in this playoff competition, playoff bracket. But they could still just run all over those guys, throw all over those guys. The Chiefs defense has been struggling of late. So I have the Browns making it to the Super Bowl, and then I have anyone from the NFC just falling apart.
That was great. And actually, okay, I need this on the record right now. So you're picking plus 3,000 Browns. All right, what do you want the prize to be if you are correct? If you call this right now, what do you want?
What do I want? Who's giving it to me?
Me.
From you? Okay. I don't know, man. I don't know.
I can make, we can make things happen too. What would be, what's the prize? Let's think about this, Mason. Here, let's think about this. What is the prize if Freddie is right about the Super Bowl before the wild card begins? Because that's a pretty great pick.
I think we give him a giant Kevin Stefanski fat head to put up.
No, I'm not a Stefanski fan. Hell no.
I think
All right, then we'll get you a Flacco one.
maybe, okay, we either get him a piece of memorabilia or we get a literal crown and I'll have it shipped to you,
Uh,
and you are the king of the of bets that year. I don't know. We'll think about it, or I'll just send you $100 on Venmo or something. But either way, that is. I think you need to be rewarded if you're correct about this pick because it's a ballsy pick.
So okay, I'm not asking for it, but I will accept it, and I guess I benefit from you guys just taking the the guy that the odds makers agree with.
Right.
Right. I don't have to pay anything. I like this. This is great.
Yeah. But anyway, man, love the pick. It's I just love, well thought out. You placed it all in front of us, and right now, after listening to all that, I wouldn't be surprised if the Browns won the Super Bowl.
It would be so much fun, dude. And I like the Flacco idea because I grew up in Baltimore, grew up a Ravens fan. Flacco was like that perfect time where I'm just getting into football. Win the Super Bowl 2012. I was in 8th grade. It was like, wow. So that would actually be a lot of fun. But awesome.
Plus,
Cool.
he's poised for it. His most 300-yard season in his entire career.
Yeah.
It would be poetic.
It would be. All right. So are we ready for bets?
Yeah, let's get into bets.
I think we are.
Who wants to start us off?
Can I go ahead?
Yes.
Can I start? Because I wanna bring up the Tyreek Hill under, okay? Because I was maybe called a little crazy, and this was the sweatiest lock of my life, okay? Getting up to it, the Dolphins had I want to say he had 76 yards entering the fourth quarter. Here's my biggest thing was I had told multiple people about this pick, not just on the podcast, but like my boss at work had like $1,000 down on this pick. Like it, yeah, I know. I told him to pick it and I told him to put like $25 and he just comes in the next day. He's like, I put $1,000 down on it. So I was really praying that I did not screw over multiple people. And thankfully, the only reason this worked out is because he was hitting Tyreek a couple times on the last drive where the Dolphins had an opportunity to go down and take the lead. And so then he goes to hit Hill. Hill kind of jumps up for it, gets hit in the back, falls. It ends up being a PI anyways. But Hill was hurt on the play. So then I think the very next play was the Tua interception. And I was screaming at the top of my lungs because it was a big, big win. So for 2 weeks in a row now, the lock of the week is a dub. I'm 2-0 on my locks of the week the last 2 weeks with that Cardinals minus 13 a couple weeks ago. This week, I'm actually looking at an over-under total. I'm actually going with the under in the Eagles-Buccaneers game, that being under 44. Something about this game just tells me this is going to be one of those weird kind of games that we have. It's going to be the lowest scoring game of the weekend, and it's going to be a weird game where this is like a 16-9 game, like a 17-9. I think this is going to be one of those just weird games like that. We have one every single playoff. This is the one where I think we're going to get it. I think the Buccaneers are going to struggle on offense, and I think the Eagles are going to do just barely enough to kind of scrape by. Not enough to impress everybody, but just enough to scrape by. So give me the under 44 at minus 115. Freddie, what's your picks for this week?
Love it, man. I just have to say for the listeners out there, Mason meant plus 13.5 on the Cardinals, or plus 11.5 on the Cardinals.
That's
not
what I meant.
minus. Yeah. I like that pick. I have a couple that I would consider locks this week. Obviously, the Browns money line, love it. Bills, I'm not even gonna pick that money line, but give me James Cook 50+ yards and a touchdown. And then Rams Lions go alternate over 44.5. Love to see that. I think that's easily a high scoring game. So a couple of picks there. You can also throw in Cowboys to win. So locks of the week. I'm feeling it, dudes. I went with a bunch.
I love it, bro. You're feeling yourself, and if it looked like I wasn't paying attention, it's because I'm trying to place the bets you're saying as you say them. Mason, I just locked in the under for the Eagles and the Buccaneers. Just put money line on the Browns, and I'm gonna have to listen to this over so I get all of your bets. So I place everything because, guys, we're hot right now. We're 6-0 on our locks of the week. So why don't I go ahead and tell you guys my lock of the week? Echoing a little bit, the game that we've been talking about a lot is the Browns and the Texans. And my lock of the week, which I love, is David Njoku over 55.5 yards. So he's hit this in 3 of his last 4. Now, 2 of those games were for 100 plus, and the third was for 90. The Texans ranked 23rd in passing yards allowed. I think Flacco has a great game, and I think Njoku's a part of that. So over 55.5, that's free to me, man. I'm throwing money all over that. So that is my lock of the week, Njoku over 55.5.
Love it. Yeah.
Any other bets we got, boys? Anything that you're not 100% on, but still might be fun to place $5 here or there?
I will say I'm not mad about the Bills being at -10. I do kind of like the -10 line, and I fully expect that they are going to hit that line. The other one, kind of piggybacking off of what Freddie said, right? Freddie has full belief that the Dolphins can game against the Chiefs. They're at +185, so not a bad money line to take there. If you guys are looking at that, their line is currently +4.5. So I think if you could definitely take that line, but you've got more value out of the money line, especially if you really think that this is their game to win. The other one that also is plus money that's interesting, the Rams are at +145. So if you're a big Matthew Stafford truther, then you may have an opportunity there to earn some money at +145 on the Rams.
I gotta defend myself a little bit. Dolphins Chiefs is one of the 2 games that I'm least confident in. So I believe the Dolphins will pull it out. I think it could go either way. I don't think the Chiefs will call the right game, but I think if they do, they win that game.
How much do you think the weather plays a factor?
I mean, is there precipitation? I haven't had a chance to check.
I don't believe so.
I mean, Tua rips that, and in the cold, that's going to hurt. But if you're in the NFL, you just got to catch that thing. And the Dolphins can run the ball themselves. They got the talent to do it. They don't always block for it, but they have the talent to do it. So I don't know if weather necessarily limits anyone in this if there's no precipitation. I don't think the cold really makes a huge difference.
Oh,
hey, we'll find out. We'll find out. It's going to be 9 degrees. They're calling a low of -6, and you're going to have about winds of about 14 miles an hour. So this is it is going to be one of the coldest games in NFL history. I feel like it's been a while since we've had one of these really cold playoff games, like the old Lambeau games and stuff like that. So this big cold front that is going to freeze Jack in his house this weekend is, it's going to affect this game and probably a few more.
It's going to be bad, man. And I mean, like Mason just alluded to, so I'm in Chicago. I grew up in Chicago. I played football my entire life. And I can tell you that football, when it gets below freezing, is a different animal. And it is, Freddie, to your point, totally agree. These guys are professionals. They get paid millions of dollars. They should be able to adjust to that weather. Absolutely, they should. We've seen all year players that should be catching balls that they don't catch when it's nice out. So I think when it's 9 degrees, it changes everything, man. Those hits are 10 times worse. The injuries are going to be all over the board. Like, it really does change the game. I think it's going to be honestly, I don't even think it's going to be that fun to watch because it's going to be so cold. I think they're going to have trouble moving the ball, but we'll see.
So,
hey, and go ahead, Freddie.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, can we place a bet on how many interceptions are the Dolphins going to get based off of Chiefs receivers dropping balls that hit their hands?
Yeah, I was just about to say, what's the prop on Kadarius Toney having an embarrassing drop? Should we just make that bet between us 3?
Yeah, I mean, at that point, it's probably. I mean, the problem is it's probably like -600, so it's not worth it.
Yeah, right.
The value's not there.
-6,000.
Right, and I guess we would have to then determine what defines embarrassing, but still,
all
fair.
Yeah.
I have to say though, with the weather, I think it's an important note, right? I have work this evening. I'm going to be going to work. I work in a restaurant, and we have a walk-in freezer. That walk-in freezer is kept at -4 degrees, which is about pretty close to the temperature of what it's going to be at that Chiefs game. I can tell you right now, I spent 5 minutes in that freezer, and I don't want to be in there. Your every part of your body gets cold, your clothes get cold, your hands get cold, everything else is cold. It's awful. I can't imagine having to play football in that. I think the coldest we had to play in Arizona was like 60 something degrees. So having to play football in the temperature of what is basically a freezer, it's going to be really difficult. I think it's going to be the most interesting game of the weekend, and it sucks that it's on Peacock for those of you who don't have Peacock.
Yeah. Well, so let me look. I grew up in the Northeast, so I'm not Chicago.
So did I. I grew up in Midwest. Midwest, baby.
We get some cold weather up here, not all the time, not as low, but I've played in the teens before. I get it. No excuses. Tyreek Hill, look, come on, man. That's you just got to do you just got to catch it. No excuses. You make sure you bring your heated benches. You bring coach. Coats. You bring sideline heaters, and it's not perfect, but come on, buckle up. And yeah, as we were saying, look, this is definitely the most interesting game, the most boring game that also has like zero confidence, could go either way. Is Eagles Bucks, but
That's you're absolutely right, Freddie. They should be prepared for this and they should do it. But if you're Tyreek Hill and you've just been banging IG models in Miami for the last 10 months, then I don't think that you've really been like conditioning your body for cold weather games. You've just been living it up in Miami, bro. And I would do the same thing.
If this were like the Ravens or something like that, I think it'd be a lot more plausible. But it's the fact that you got to ask the team from Miami, who it's at a certain point in the season has an advantage because it is so damn hot on their sideline. They're in an advantage to then go in on this negative degree day. It is going to be quite a challenge. But I tell you what, if they do it, this is the game where they can kind of prove everybody wrong, where we can beat these teams, we can do this. This is that game for them. This is their opportunity right here this weekend.
Yep, you're right. All right, guys, thanks again for joining us for another episode of Film Facts Stats. Again, we are a notch above your group chat. I'm Jack Coyle. With me is Freddie Freeman and Mason Wood. You can listen to us on all of the major podcasting platforms, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. You can also see us on YouTube, and we are on all major social networking channels. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next week.